There's a bunch of reports going around that Costco has now been selling a good little bit of gold. Wells Fargo is saying it could be up to $200 million worth of gold bars a month now. They started selling them around September. By December, they said they sold $100 million in the previous quarter, and now they're increasing that pace. So we are at a crossroads, and Jaguar is about to talk about it. Is this just kind of we're going to call it a fun little thing for Costco, or are they going to be a serious gold player? But Jaguar, $200 million worth of gold bars in the gold space. Around how big is the market, and how much is $200 million worth of gold compared to what is being sold on a monthly basis?
The $200 million as a size of the total market is actually very small. I mean, it gets to the almost minuscule numbers to make any significant amount of dent. However, the trend is strong. And the question really becomes, how big could it potentially get in the long run for Costco? So let me give you some context, because the first thing is it's the distinction between acquiring gold through an ETF or acquiring gold physically. And then within physical, Costco is taking the charge with a leadership position. There was an article out on Bloomberg, and this was published about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, in which they did a comparison of gold price chart versus the popular ETF, which is GLD, as we're all aware of. And it shows really eye-popping comparison that shows that GLD itself has seen the steady and rather multiple year for a very long time, going all the way back to the beginning of 2022, steady outflows from that ETF. And then overlaid on top of this is the price of gold chart, which has gone straight up. So this has actually not resulted in any kind of buying frenzy in the paper market, and GLD would be the instrument for this. So where is all the demand coming from? It's coming from physical gold. Now we know from a lot of work we have done in the past that China is a big physical gold buyer, and other international bodies as well, and then central banks. But it's actually in the United States, it would be Costco at the top of the list. But then you also have pawn shops, you have other companies such as A-Mark International that basically sells physical golds and bars and coins right from its website. Costco also sells it online. So it's a very important distinction to make, that while gold prices has surged higher and higher and higher, it has been a function of physical gold, not the paper gold. Very, very different type of market than we saw previously before 2022 for gold.
So Jaguar, Costco is selling their gold at a less than 1% markup, according to the CFO. How does that compare to a lot of other places? And you were talking a little bit there about the kind of buying these ETFs versus buying the real gold bar. What does the process for buying and selling gold normally look like? And yeah, what is that 1% markup compared to how people have traditionally been buying gold?
So 1% markup is actually the lowest in the industry, because I can tell you that somebody who comes from Asia, myself, where the market for physical gold in terms of jewelry and other forms of consumption as a novelty to acquire and hold as an asset and portfolio is very, very high all the time for generations. That To give you some context, if you were to ever go to an Indian jewelry store and you ask, and you're trying to buy something, that is made of gold, they will weigh the gold in the scale right in front of you, and then they will apply 6 to 7% markup on it, and then on top of it they will be making fee, they call it, and many other things. The point is that from other sources, 6% or higher markup are actually very, very common. The fact that Costco is selling it for a 1% markup is potentially lowest in the industry, but that's probably also the attractiveness of it, right? Where you're much, much better off going to a trustworthy source, right, to Costco. If you want to buy physical gold, buy it, hold it. And that's exactly what a lot of people are doing.
Do you envision Costco being a big player in this market? Now, it kind of feels like so far they've maybe used it as a tactic just to get people talking about it, to get people in the stores and maybe buy some other stuff. You buy your $2,000 gold bar and then you buy $100 worth of groceries or something. But do you envision Costco ever becoming a big player in this market? And about what point would you of sales would you start to say, hey, Costco actually is a major player in this market, is the biggest player in the market? Where kind of are those general milestones where you would start to think that a little bit?
I think they do want to become a big player in this market. I think this is pretty clear from the trend. And I think it's pretty clear from the news coverage that it's getting. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the performance of gold itself, right? Look, there's a time there's always this lag, this time that passes, that starts to gradually shift opinions on the street. And what I mean by that is many people look at gold as a hedge against high and persistently high inflation. So when you think about when inflation has started to really, you know, put a dent, essentially, it was really beginning from 2021. Once we had a post-pandemic surge in everything in the country, but it has taken several years, 2021, a lot of 2022, and then 2023, to start to essentially shift people's opinion that inflation is high and it is persistently staying high. And I think that now you're starting to see the impact of that in the physical demand of gold, where more people are opting for this asset to be as part of their total assets. And I think that's a trend that's going to gradually continue to develop. So I think, to answer your question, it ultimately will depend the price of gold, like really any asset class. I mean, if you can think about cryptos the same way, as long as the prices are strong, people will continue to accumulate position, will find comfortable. Same thing with gold. My view on gold itself is that on a technical basis, I believe it is going to about $2,900 per ounce. So that's still significant upside from here. But I think I've heard commentary from some of the smartest people I've followed, where looking at the history from the past, they believe that it is much, much higher over long term. So when you think about it, that sort of a momentum is going to continue to put a bid in physical gold, and Costco will be the type of companies that will benefit from it. One thing I will mention this way: if you, historically speaking, um, the biggest buyer of physical gold have been central banks. And I have some hard data over here where I can show you. So in the month of uh, July 2023, central banks bought $73.5 trillion of physical gold. That's that's the Fed, ECB, BOE, BOJ, a lot of the biggest central banks combined, right? So $73.5 trillion worth of gold, physical gold purchases were done by central banks in July. August was 78 trillion. not trillion, 78 tons, I should say. I want to cut back. So in July specifically, the central banks bought 73 tons, not trillions, across that, tons of physical gold. And then August of 2023, central banks bought 78 tons of physical gold. That was the peak for the central banks, interestingly. And since then, it has been a steady downward shift where even the central banks globally are not as active in the physical gold market. So, for example, in October, we saw central banks bought only 41 tons of physical gold, which was a big step down from 78 tons in the prior month. And then November was 44, and then December was 16. Most recent month, February, which is the latest data that I have available, was 19.1 ton of physical gold that was acquired by central banks, which would be, compared to 6 months ago, it would be less than 30% of how much typically central banks buy on a per month basis. 30% of the prior history. So it's very interesting when you look at this, because you see a trend like this where central banks are not the biggest buyer in the recent month of physical gold. Paper, which would be GLD, and instruments like GLD are seeing outflows for last 2 consecutive years. So then where is the demand coming from? It is coming from retail, and it is coming from physical, and it is coming from very places like Costco and internationally as well.
All right, Jaguar, as we wrap up this video here, and if you did enjoy it, everyone make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of stuff, and make sure you look for Jaguar's links down in the description below. Jaguar is fantastic, and you should definitely be looking out for all of the stuff that he does. When we look back at kind of Costco's role in the gold market and how we end up shifting, I know Costco's big internationally as well, or is mostly in the US, but is getting bigger internationally. What do you think we're going to kind of end up talking about in this discussion between Costco and gold in about a year from now, in a couple years from now? Does Costco continue at this strongly, or do they kind of pull back and just a nice extra product for them?
No, I think it's going to continue to grow strongly in their favor. Costco is a very trustworthy retailer, right? And it is one of the top destinations for common household, to just for shopping or all kinds of things, from simple as grocery for your pantry, also to you know most expensive and best wines that you can get. I mean, think of it. The wine is a good example. And by the way, Costco also sell expensive novelty watches and other things. So wine would be a good example over here. And I think a simple exercise as to how that particular market has performed for Costco over the years can tell us a lot, because this is an area where Costco entered first time more than 10 years ago, and people were wondering at that time what exactly Costco had in mind. And turns out it was one of the best decisions they made, because it has steady brought a slew of buyers, and then ultimately it turned into a pretty strong business for Costco, and that's how they have always consistently maintained their same store sales growth expectations above the peers, even at times when the economy has been downshifting. And I think this is just another angle. The physical gold market is just another angle to continue to go down the same exact path and see what's working. When you draw that much attention, that's going to result in accelerating traffic. In fact, this was very clearly visible when we saw the latest comps data for the month of March, which came in at 6.9% year over year increase, adjusting for Easter shift and excluding gas in that. That is very, very strong. When you think about this, that the total US retail industry is growing at less than 1.2% on a year over year basis. And here, the US comps for Costco were up 6.9%. And why is that? Same thing. People like shopping and they get what they need. And now physical gold is just another part of that mix that is boosting the traffic.